My name is Grace Anderson. I'm 34 years old, and I found out about my house at my parents' 40th anniversary dinner. My grandmother set down her fork, smiled at me across the candles, and asked how I liked the house she'd bought me, while I was paying $1,080 a month for a one-bedroom apartment with a shower that ran cold every third day. I remember the clink of my sister's wine glass stopping halfway to her mouth. I remember my mother standing up very fast to refill water nobody had asked for. What my grandmother did next, nobody at that table saw coming. And what I found 3 days later, sealed inside my mother's china cabinet, was worse than anything anyone said out loud that night. Before this was over, I would sign a piece of paper my family never saw coming, sit across from my mother at that same table, and learn exactly what my place in this family had cost, down to the dollar. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet women stop paying for everyone else's peace. If stories about standing up for yourself speak to you, drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Because you'll want to hear how a woman with a smile and a cane took my whole family apart without ever raising her voice. Let me back up a week. I work nights in the pediatric intensive care unit at the Children's Hospital in Dayton, Ohio. 12 years on the floor. I put myself through nursing school on double shifts and a diet of gas station coffee, and I have held the hands of more frightened mothers than I can chart. I'm good in a crisis. It's the quiet weeks that get expensive. That Tuesday, I came home at 8 in the morning and found a letter taped to my mailbox from the property company. Effective the first of the month, my rent was going from $940 to $1,080. $140 a month for the privilege of a parking spot I had to defend like a homestead claim. I stuck the letter to my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a chicken, watered the pothos on my windowsill. His name is Herb, don't judge me, and did the math standing up. I could cover it. I could always cover it. That's the thing about being the daughter who covers things. Everyone stops asking whether you should have to. I'm the one my family calls when Dad's blood pressure medication changes, when the insurance company won't budge, when a form needs reading or a hard phone call needs making. I keep a folder for their paperwork the way I keep charts for my patients. Neat, dated, ready. My week had exactly one obligation that wasn't a shift. My parents' 40th anniversary dinner, which I was cooking, because of course I was. I figured the biggest emergency on my calendar was getting the roast out on time. I have never been so wrong about a dinner in my life. To know my family, you only need to watch us set a table. My mother, Carol, 63, directs. She ran the front office of an elementary school for 30 years, and she has never met a room she didn't reorganize. My father, Bill, 65, retired electrician, checks the weather. He checks it when things are calm, and he checks it harder when they aren't. A storm front in another state has gotten that man out of more arguments than any lawyer could. And then, there's my sister, Madison, 31, office manager at a dental practice, divorced 2.5 years now from a man named Kyle, who left the way he arrived, suddenly, and with somebody else's suitcase. She has a 5-year-old Tyler, who is the single best thing our family has produced in a generation. I love them. I want that on the record before everything else goes on it. When I was 11, Madison spent 4 nights in the hospital with asthma, and I stayed home making boxed macaroni for my father because Mom slept in a chair on the ward. When they finally came home, my mother put her hand on my head like she was paying out wages and said, "Family carries family." I stood a little taller. I was 11. I didn't understand yet that in our house, that sentence only ever pointed one direction. Some families pass down silverware or a cabin at a lake. Mine passed down a job description. There was the daughter who needed carrying, and the daughter who carried. And nobody ever once asked which one I wanted to be. I would have said it didn't bother me. I would have said it right up until the night of that dinner. There was a precedent, and I want to be honest about it, because for years I told myself it was a one-time thing. When I was 17, I had a college fund. It wasn't big. Some savings bonds from my grandparents, birthday money, 3 summers of lifeguard wages. My mother banked for me so it stays safe. The winter I was filling out applications, Madison cracked 2 front teeth on a trampoline, and the orthodontist's estimate read like a mortgage. Braces. Oral surgery. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that the family was going to borrow from my fund, just for now, and that I was the one who could handle it. I said no. I want you to know that. 17-year-old me looked her in the eye and said that money was mine, and she said something I'd hear again half my life later. She said the account was in her name. Honey. Custodial. For my own protection. There was nothing a minor could do about a custodial account, and by the time I wasn't a minor, the account wasn't anything at all. I worked nights, did 2 years of community college, and walked into nursing school owing nobody in that house a cent, which I mistook for winning. Nobody ever called it stealing. It was borrowing, shifting, helping, tiding over. My family moved money the way rivers move, quietly, downhill, always toward Madison. And here's the part that matters. I knew all this. I wasn't a fool with stars in her eyes. I just believed the river only ran through accounts, through birthday envelopes, through small things. I believed there was a line somewhere they wouldn't cross. There was no line. The anniversary dinner was my production, naturally. 40 years of marriage, held at my parents' house in Beaver Creek, 20 minutes from my apartment. I took the Friday off, ordered the cake, ironed the tablecloth my mother swears is heirloom Irish linen and is absolutely from a department store in 1989. And I picked up my grandmother from the airport, Ruth Calloway, 84, my mother's mother, flying up from Sarasota, Florida, where she'd moved to a senior community after my grandfather Walt died 3.5 years ago. They'd farmed soybeans outside Zinnia for 50 years, and after he passed, she sold the place, the house, the barn, the 60 acres, and headed for Sunshine. She came off that jet bridge with a cane she used like a walking stick, not a crutch, wearing lipstick and a good wool coat in April. My grandmother has a spine you could plumb a wall with. She hugged me hard at the curb and held on 1 extra second, which I noticed and filed away the way nurses file things. In the car, she asked about my shifts, about Herb the Pothos, about whether my mother still rearranged other people's kitchens. She did not ask about Madison, which was unusual. At the house she kissed everyone, praised the roast, and then sat quietly in the good chair while my mother narrated the flower arrangements. I caught her looking around the dining room slowly, corner to corner, the way you look at a bill before you sign for it. I thought, she's just old. She's just tired from the flight. I've replayed that look 100 times since. She wasn't tired. She was counting something. And whatever it added up to, it didn't match. Dinner started the way our dinners always start. My father telling the story of the day they met, my mother correcting it, everyone laughing on schedule. Madison had Tyler show off how he could write his whole name, first and last, plus a dinosaur, and honestly, it was the best moment of the night. Somewhere between the roast and the salad, Madison mentioned she was redoing the back patio. At my house, she said, easy as breathing, pavers, maybe a fire pit. My mother beamed. My father said pavers were smart, low maintenance, and I, because I apparently cannot let a quiet moment live, laughed and said, well, don't hire me. My landlord just jacked my rent $140, so my patio budget is a lawn chair on a parking spot. It was a joke. Everybody chuckled. Everybody except my grandmother. I was watching her because I'd been watching her all night, and I saw the joke land on her like weather. She stopped chewing. She looked at me. Not a glance. A look. The kind she used to aim at a soybean field before a hailstorm. And then she looked at my mother, and something in her face closed like a ledger. She set her fork down slowly, deliberately, the way you'd lay a flag on a coffin. The table kept talking. Tyler wanted more rolls. My father was saying something about sealant. And over all of it, my grandmother sat perfectly still with her hands folded, waiting for a gap in the noise, patient as frost. I felt it coming before I had any idea what it was. 12 years in an ICU teaches you the sound a room makes right before the alarms go off. The gap came when my mother stood to clear the salad plates. My grandmother smiled, And I want to be precise here, because that smile is burned into me. She smiled the way you smile at a child you love who has just told you an obvious lie. Then she turned to me and said, "So, how do you like the house I bought you?" I blinked. What house? I still live in my tiny apartment. I actually laughed a little when I said it because I thought it was the setup to a joke, or a slip. The beginning of something we'd gently steer around the way you do with grandparents. Nobody laughed with me. The room went silent. And I mean, silent. Fork scrape, silent. Furnace hum, silent. And then every eye at that table turned to my parents. Not to Grandma. To my parents. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Confusion looks up. Guilt looks at each other. My mother was standing with the water pitcher in both hands, pouring into a glass that was already full, water climbing the rim, and she said, "Mom, you're tired. It's been a long flight," in a voice I had never heard her use, high and smooth at the same time, like a customer service recording. My father studied the door to the garage as if the weather might be in there. Madison stared at her plate so hard I thought she'd crack it. And Tyler, 5 years old, God bless him, looked around the table and said, "What house?" Out of the mouths of babes. Nobody answered him either. My grandmother let the silence sit for one long breath, then another. Then she did something none of us expected. She laughed. My grandmother, who had just dropped a live grenade in the middle of a 40th anniversary dinner, waved her own question away like smoke and said, "Old age. Don't mind me. I get my stories crossed." Then she lifted her glass, wished my parents 40 more years, and asked for the potatoes. The whole table exhaled at once. My mother laughed too loud. My father found his appetite. Madison started breathing again, and within 5 minutes the dinner had closed over the whole like pond water. Everyone bought it. Everyone except me, because I was still watching her hands. My grandmother's hands were dead steady. No tremble, no flutter, no confused old woman anywhere in those hands. She ate her potatoes and told a story about my grandfather and a stubborn heifer, and her eyes stayed cool the entire time. And I sat there with my pulse going like I'd walked into a room where the monitors were quiet but the numbers were all wrong. When the cake was cut and the coats came out, my mother announced that Bill would run Grandma back to the Fairfield Inn. My grandmother pulled on her gloves without looking up and said, "Grace will take me." Not a question. My mother opened her mouth, and my grandmother added, "She's on my way." Nobody is on anybody's way in Beaver Creek. We drove the first 10 minutes without a word, past the dark strip malls, her cane across her knees like a rifle. In the hotel parking lot she finally turned to me, and there was nothing confused in her face at all. "I'm not addled, Grace, and I'm not tired. 2 years ago, I sold the farm and wired your mother $185,000 for a house, for you." We sat in her hotel room until almost 1 in the morning, and she laid it out the way she used to lay out seed invoices. In order, no drama, every number face up. After Grandpa Walt died, she sold the farm for $410,000. She banked her half of a life and asked herself what the rest was for. And what she wanted, she said, was to see her money do some good while she was alive to watch. Madison had gotten the wedding, years back, the big one, the open bar. I had gotten a card. Grandma knew it, had always known it, the way she knew which field flooded first. So the plan was this: a house for Grace, bought quiet, handed over on my 32nd birthday with a bow on the mailbox. She'd just had her knee replaced that spring. She couldn't fly, couldn't stand at a closing table in Ohio. So when my mother volunteered to handle everything, the search, the paperwork, the keys, Grandma thanked God for a capable daughter and wired the money north. $185,000, with the purpose written right on the transfer memo. Then she waited for her phone to ring. It never did. What arrived instead, 2 weeks after the closing, was a thank you bouquet. Lilies and white roses, a florist's card signed with my name. "I kept that card," she said, and pulled her purse into her lap. "It's the only thank you I ever got from you, And it didn't sound like you. You'd have called me. You'd have cried and made it awkward, like a proper granddaughter. She held the little florist card out to me, and my hands went cold. I had never sent my grandmother flowers in my life. Somebody had been writing my lines for 2 years. I wanted to know what else I'd said. Here is how you keep a stolen house standing for 2 years. You build a fence around every conversation. My mother had told Grandma a story, and the story was me. Grace is overwhelmed, Mom. Grace is private about money. You know how proud she is. And the load-bearing beam of it. Grace begged us to keep the house quiet. Because Madison just went through the divorce, and she can't bear for her sister to feel small. Don't mention it on the phone. Let Grace bring it up when she's ready. My grandmother, a woman raised on tact the way other people are raised on scripture, honored that for 2 years. She thought she was protecting me. Every polite silence was a brick, and my mother had gotten my own grandmother to lay them. Once, early on, Grandma slipped. She asked me on the phone, "Are you settled in, sweetheart?" I'd just moved apartments that fall. The new 1-bedroom, the cold shower. So I chirped, "Yes, I love it. It's small, but it's mine." My mother was apparently in the room in Sarasota when Grandma repeated that back later, wondering out loud why I'd called a 3-bedroom small. And my mother laughed and said, "That's Grace. She'd call a castle cozy," and changed the subject. When Grandma's doubts got louder, no photos, no housewarming, no address for Christmas cards that wasn't my old one, my mother had an answer for that too. "Mom, you were on pain pills half that year. You're remembering it sideways." They used her new knee against her. They used my own voice against her. Let me ask you something before I go on, because I've wondered about this every day since. Has your family ever written your lines for you? Thanked somebody in your name? Stayed silent in your name? Apologized in your name? Tell me in the comments and subscribe, because what I found 3 days later in my mother's china cabinet I am still not over. In that hotel room, my grandmother asked me the only question that mattered. "What do you want to do, Grace?" I didn't answer her right away, and she didn't push. She just told me one more thing, and it's the thing that finally got through the professional calm I wear like scrubs. She said that when she wired the money, she also wrote a card. By hand, at her kitchen table in Sarasota, with the good pen Grandpa gave her the year they paid off the tractor. She sealed it, wrote my name on the front, and mailed it to my mother with one instruction. "Give this to Grace, with the keys." She even remembered what she wrote, word for word, because she'd drafted it twice to get it right. "For Grace, so you never have to ask anyone for a roof again. Love, Grandma." So you never have to ask. She said my grandfather hated debt more than hail, and that the two of them used to lie awake in the bad years listening to the mortgage breathe down the hall like a third person in the house. A roof nobody could call in. That was the whole gift. That was the entire point. I asked her if she'd ever seen that card again, and she said no. She assumed it was in a drawer of mine somewhere, saved, because that's what I'd do. She was right. That is what I'd do. I have every card she's ever sent me, rubber-banded in a shoebox with the sympathy notes from Grandpa's funeral. There was no card in my shoebox, because the card had never reached me, and until that night I hadn't known to miss it. I stood up and got my coat. She asked where I was going at midnight, and I heard my own voice come out flat and level, my code blue voice. "I need to see the house. Tonight." The address was easy to find. I'd been mailing birthday cards to it for 2 years. 214 Meadowlark Lane, Fairborn, 15 minutes from my parents' place. I parked across the street at 10 past midnight and sat there with the engine ticking. A small brick ranch, 3 bedrooms, the porch light burning gold over a welcome mat shaped like a sunflower. Madison's wind chimes, the ones from her old apartment balcony, hung by the door, dead still in the cold. On the driveway, in fading sidewalk chalk, somebody small had drawn a rocket ship and a stick family of 2. I sat in my car looking at my house with my sister's whole life inside it, and the worst memory of the night rose up quiet as floodwater. 2 years ago, I helped her move in. I took a Saturday off after a night shift, and I carried her couch through that red front door. I hung Tyler's curtains, the ones with the planets. I brought a housewarming gift, a cast iron skillet, because Madison never owns one. And I stood in that kitchen drinking store-brand lemonade while my mother told everyone how blessed we were that the down payment had worked out. I'd asked, once, where the money came from. A little 3-bedroom, no mortgage sign, no lender's paperwork on the counter. And my father, checking the weather on his phone, said Grandma's land money helped. Some of Grandpa's old parcels. You know how it is. It had sounded exactly true. It was even half of it true. I carried boxes into my own stolen house and thanked them for letting me help. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. My mother. Coffee tomorrow? Just us girls. We should talk about Grandma. She's been confused lately. I went to coffee. I want to be clear that I went knowing, and I sat in my parents' kitchen in Beaver Creek with my hands around a mug I didn't drink from because the nurse in me wanted vitals before a diagnosis. My mother worked through her opening like she'd rehearsed it in the shower. Grandma's getting up there. Grandma's been muddled since the knee, since Walt, since the move. Grief does strange things. It might be time to talk about her affairs. As a family. She said, as a family, the way some people say amen. Then she reached across and squeezed my wrist and said the money question was complicated, sweetheart. That Grandma's gift had really been for both you girls, in a way. That Madison had nowhere to go after Kyle left. There was a baby to think about. And things had just moved fast. I let her finish. My father passed through the kitchen once, said something about rain moving in Thursday, and evaporated into the garage. I asked one question, and it wasn't rhetorical. Whose name is on the deed, Mom? She refilled my mug I hadn't touched. Houses, names, that's just paperwork, Grace. What matters is, family has a roof. There it was. My whole life, in one sentence. What's mine is paperwork. What's hers is a roof. And while she said it, her eyes did something I might have missed if I hadn't spent 12 years watching monitors instead of faces. They flicked, once, to the china cabinet in the dining room. The tall oak one, the one with the drawer where 40 years of this family's paper lives. Then the phone rang, the neighbor about the fence line, and my mother stepped out to the yard with her voice going bright. I stood up. I know that drawer. I've done their taxes at that dining room table for 10 years. I know it the way I know the crash cart. 3rd drawer down, deeds and titles in the green folder, insurance in the red. I'm not going to pretend my hands weren't shaking. The green folder had a new manila envelope in it, unlabeled, and inside that envelope was the whole machine. The settlement statement for 214 Meadowlark Lane, closed 25 months ago. Purchase price? $185,000, paid in full, no lender. The deed, recorded at the county, grantee's name typed clean as a verdict, Madison A. Brooks, unmarried woman. A printout of the incoming wire from Ruth Calloway, and there in the memo line, in my grandmother's dictation, the words, for Grace's house. And underneath all of it, at the bottom of the envelope, a small square shape I knew before I touched it. A greeting card envelope, ivory, gone soft at the corners. Just my name on the front in my grandmother's upright farm ledger hand, Grace, still sealed. 2 years in a drawer, 8 feet from where the family eats Thanksgiving, and nobody had even bothered to open it. I don't know why that was the thing. Not the deed, not the wire. But that was the thing. I photographed every page with my phone, put the folder back exactly as I found it, and I took the card, because it had my name on it and it was mine. I read it in my car in the driveway. For Grace, so you never have to ask anyone for a roof again. Love, Grandma. I was still sitting there when my mother tapped on my window, waved, warm as July, and said through the glass, Family carries family, Grace. Remember that this week. Then she smiled and went inside, warm as ever. A work order, delivered with a wave. I gave it one day, Then I knocked on the red door I'd once carried a couch through. Madison answered in dental office scrubs with her hair in the same crooked bun she's worn since middle school, and when she saw my face, she stepped back like the porch had tilted. We did it in the kitchen, quietly, because Tyler was building something loud out of blocks in the living room. I asked what she knew, and to her credit, the only credit I could give her that day, she didn't perform. She knew the money came from Grandma's farm sale. Mom had told her Grandma wanted to help while she was still alive to see it. And when Madison asked once whether she should call and thank her, our mother said no. Grandma hates a fuss, honey. Don't make it weird. It's handled. So she didn't ask again. She signed where the title company flagged and moved her broken life into a free house and chose, every single day for 2 years, not to wonder why a farm-proud 82-year-old woman had never once come to see the thing she bought. "Would you have asked?" she said, and her voice cracked. "If it were you? A house, Grace. I had a baby and half a savings account, and Kyle took the car." Then Tyler ran in holding a dinosaur sticker sheet, demanded I wear the Triceratops, and ran out again, and we both stood there while the argument died of shame. Madison wiped her eyes with her wrist. "What do you want me to do? Rip up the deed? Put Tyler on the street?" I looked at the sticker on the back of my hand. "It's easier to be angry at people who don't hand you dinosaurs." I told her the truth. "I don't know yet." I went back to work because the ICU is the one place where my job description is written down. 2 nights later, we stabilized a 9-year-old who'd come in from a rollover on Route 35, and at 4 a.m, his mother, a stranger, a woman whose name I'd known for 6 hours, gripped my hand at the elevator and thanked me like I'd built the hospital myself. I stood there thinking, strangers thank me more than my family ever has. On break, I told Dana Whitfield the whole thing over vending machine coffee. Dana's been a nurse for 15 years and has the bedside delivery of a nail gun. She listened all the way through, then said, "You know what you're doing right now? You're triaging them, assessing, stabilizing, managing the family's pain." She crushed her cup. "They're not your patients, Grace. You're allowed to be the one bleeding." I drove home, my own apartment, my own cold shower, and I did the only thing I know how to do when the numbers are all wrong. I charted. I opened my laptop and built a timeline, because nurses chart for a reason. Memory lies. So do mothers. Every entry got a date and a source. The farm sale. The wire. 25 months ago. Memo line and all. The closing. The deed. The recorded transfer. The florist card. The phone call where my "I love it" got clipped out of my mouth and stitched into their story. My rent letter. Their patio pavers. When I was done, it was 4 pages, no adjectives, and it read exactly like what it was. Not a misunderstanding, not a family being complicated. A plan, executed by people who knew me well enough to know I'd be too useful to suspect them. My grandmother, it turned out, had not spent 2 weeks in Ohio just to eat cake. Before she'd even boarded the flight north, she had found herself an estate attorney in Dayton, Patricia Vance, a woman of about 55 who wears reading glasses on a chain and wastes absolutely nothing, including sympathy. I drove Grandma to the appointment and planned to wait outside, and Grandma said, "You'll come in, it's your gift." And that settled the seating. Vance went through my timeline page by page like a surgeon reading films, and when she got to the wire memo, she actually tapped it twice with her pen. For Grace's house, in writing, on a bank record, with corroborating emails and a handwritten card. She looked up. "I do this for a living, and I want you to hear me. This paper trail is unusually clean. Money entrusted for a stated purpose and converted to another use. That's not a family squabble, that's conversion. Civilly, it's very winnable. Depending on how the county prosecutor feels, it may be more than civil." The word criminal sat down at the table with us, and nobody asked it to leave. Vance laid out the ladder. First, a demand letter. Return the $185,000 within 30 days. Then a civil suit if they stalled, with a referral option on the table. Then my grandmother did the thing I didn't expect, the second time in a week. She folded her hands, looked at Vance and said, "None of it moves without Grace. It was her gift. She decides how hard we swing." Everyone turned to me. I asked for a few days. I drove home, walked up my stairs, and found 6 voicemails waiting, all from my mother. I called her back once that night, and I'm glad I was sitting down. It went in stages, like watching weather move across a field. Stage 1 was outrage. A lawyer, Grace? You took your grandmother to a lawyer? Over family? As if the lawyer were the crime and not the thing the lawyer was for. Stage 2 was revision. It was a misunderstanding. The gift was always meant flexibly. And then, I swear this is true, she tried. We did it this way to protect you from the gift taxes. I do the paperwork in this family, so that one didn't survive contact. I said, there's no tax on that gift, Mom. It's under the lifetime exemption and you know it, because I'm the one who explained that to you when Grandma sold the farm. Silence on the line, 3 seconds of it. And that's when I got the truth. Because stage 3, with my mother, is always the truth. Said like a slammed door. Her voice dropped into a register I'd only ever heard aimed at other people. Fine. Yes. We used it for Madison. She was drowning, Grace. She had a baby, and that man left her with nothing. A beat. And then, flat as a nutrition label? You didn't need it. Not an apology. Not even a defense, really. A policy statement. You didn't need it. I stood in my kitchen listening to my mother explain that my inheritance from a living, breathing grandmother had been means-tested at her dining room table without me, and I understood, finally and completely, that this had never been a mistake anyone was going to fix. It was a system, working exactly as designed. I said goodnight. Then I sat down and made a decision about the letter. My father showed up at my apartment the next evening holding his cap in both hands like a man at a funeral home. I made him decaf. He sat on the edge of my couch, the couch's twin lives in Madison's living room, in my house, but I didn't say that. And he asked me to make it stop. That was his phrase. Make it stop, Gracie. He said my grandmother was old, that this lawyer business would poison whatever years she had left, that a family can survive anything except a courtroom. Then he made his offer, and it was so sad I had to look at Herb on the windowsill to keep my face still. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her you knew about the house and you were fine with it. She'll settle down. She'll rewrite whatever she needs to rewrite. Madison keeps a roof, and I will pay you back myself. Every cent. I promise you that. A 65-year-old retired electrician on a fixed pension, promising me $185,000 in the same voice he used to promise the water heater had another winter in it. I asked him the only thing I actually needed to know. You were at the closing, Dad. You knew the deed said Madison. 2 years of Sunday dinners, and you watched Grandma get managed like a bull in a chute. Why? He looked at his shoes for a long time. Your mother was sure it was right, he said finally. And you're strong, Gracie. You've always been the strong one. Madison isn't. There it was again. The family math. The whole cosmology. He hugged me at the door on his way out. I love my father. That hug felt like a receipt. Madison came the day after, and she brought Tyler. And I will never fully forgive her for that, because it worked the way she knew it would. Tyler barreled in with a drawing. My house, he announced, a brick rectangle with a red door and a rocket ship, and off to the side, holding a stick balloon, a tall figure labeled Aunt Grace. He put it on my refrigerator himself, under the chicken magnet, right next to my rent letter, and then went to negotiate with Herb. Madison stood in my kitchen and half apologized in the way our family apologizes. Sorry as a preamble, sorry as throat clearing. Then she got to it. Mom says if you sign a letter saying you knew, that you were okay with it, this all goes away. Grandma calms down. Nobody sues anybody. We're a family at Christmas. She even had the grace to look sick while she said it. I asked if she'd read the letter. She said Mom had it ready, that it was short. Of course it was short. It only had one job. To move the lie out of their mouths and into mine. Signed, notarized, permanent. My mother had asked with a work order. my father with a promise he couldn't keep, and now my sister with a 5-year-old and a crayon drawing. 3 people I love. 1 week. All holding out the same pen. If you've ever held that pen, if the peace in your house always seemed to cost exactly one person everything, and that person was you, tell me in the comments what you did, because I read everyone. And stay with me, because Saturday came, and I didn't bring a pen. Here's what I keep circling back to, though. Everyone in my family suddenly wanted my signature. Nobody had ever once wanted my name on anything before. The night before I decided, I sat with my grandmother in her hotel room, and she told me where all of this started, because she said I deserved to know what I was actually up against. It wasn't greed, she said. It was older than that. When my mother was 16, my grandfather's tractor rolled on the back slope of the Zinnia place and took his left leg below the knee. 1979. No disability check for a self-employed farmer, no neighbors who could spare more than a casserole. So my grandmother did what the ledger demanded. She took the night shift at the fairgrounds cannery and handed Carol, age 16, the house keys and 2 little brothers. I'd leave at 4 and come home at 2 in the morning, she said, and the dishes would be done and the boys would be fed, and I would tell her, every night, Grace, like a prayer, "You're my strong one." I thought I was giving her a medal. She looked down at her hands, at the wedding band gone thin as wire. I was giving her a bill. She paid it for 6 years and nobody ever paid her back, and she has spent 40 years since making sure the bill lands on somebody, because if the strong one doesn't have to carry it all, then what was her girlhood for? She met my eyes. I invented the thing that's eating you. I taught your mother that love in this family flows toward whoever's drowning, and the swimmer gets a compliment. She was quiet a moment. I'm 84. I don't have time to be tactful anymore. She wasn't rescuing me, I realized. She was paying down her own debt. There's a difference, and it mattered. The letter arrived in my mailbox the next day, hand-delivered. No stamp, just my name in my mother's handwriting, which tells you she drove 20 minutes to avoid saying any of it to my face. Inside was a single typed page, drafted for my signature. I, Grace Anderson, was informed of and consented to the use of funds provided by Ruth Calloway toward the purchase of the property at 214 Meadowlark Lane. It read like she'd typed it with gloves on. Clipped to it, a sticky note in her round, cheerful hand. Sign it and come to Sunday dinner. We'll put this behind us. Behind us. As if the last 2 years were a pothole and not a road they'd paved themselves. I sat at my kitchen table that night with 3 pieces of paper laid out in a row, and I'm not ashamed to say I sat there a long time. On the left, the letter. Sign it and I keep my family, whatever that word was still worth. Every holiday intact, every Sunday dinner warm, and the lie becomes load-bearing forever, with my name holding it up. In the middle, my phone, open to the photos of the deed and the wire. On the right, my grandmother's card, ivory and soft-cornered. So you never have to ask anyone for a roof again. 2 versions of me on one table, the one who covers things, and whoever was on the other side of that. Around midnight, I noticed the strangest thing about the letter, the detail my mother would never understand. It was the first time in 34 years that anyone in my family had needed something only I could give. Monday morning, I called in a personal day. There was a signature I needed to give. It wasn't theirs. Patricia Vance's office smells like paper and lemon oil, and on that Monday morning, it was the calmest room I'd stood in for 2 weeks. She had the affidavit ready. It was not long, and every line of it was true, which is a strange thing to notice about a document until you've spent days holding its opposite. I, Grace Anderson, was never informed of the gift. I never received it. I never consented to its diversion. I attached my timeline and the photographs of the settlement statement, the deed, the wire memo with my name in it. A notary in a cardigan watched me sign, stamped it with the little embossing squeeze that makes everything real, and that was that. No thunder. It felt, if you want the truth, like calling a time of death. The moment itself is quiet and procedural, and it only breaks you later, in the parking lot. Vance walked me through what came next in her flat, kind voice. The demand letter would go out that week. Certified mail. Return $185,000 within 30 days, or face a civil action for conversion, with all supporting documentation, meaning my affidavit, attached. They'll know it's you the moment they read it, she said, not as a warning, just as fact. I nodded. That was, in a way I couldn't have explained to her, the entire point. I had spent my whole life being the name my family never put on anything. They'd put me on a florist's card, on a script, on a lie, 2 years long. Now my name was on the truth, notarized, and no amount of Sunday dinners could unsign it. I sat in my car in the lot and breathed. The letter would land in my mother's mailbox by Thursday. Thursday night, my phone started. The voicemails came in cycles, like contractions. Thursday night was fury. How could you, after everything this family has done for you, which was a sentence I turned over for a while like a strange rock. Friday morning was tears, my mother's voice wet and wounded, asking what kind of person sends lawyers after her own mother, which was a remarkable framing, given the direction the money had traveled. Friday night was ice. We got the letter, I hope it was worth it. Your father can't eat. I didn't call back. Not out of cruelty. I'd just finally noticed that every conversation with my mother was a room she'd already arranged, and I was done walking into arranged rooms. By the weekend, her version was in circulation. My cousin Beth texted me a screenshot from the family group chat I'd apparently been removed from. Grace is suing her own mother over a misunderstanding about Grandma's money. Poor Ruth is being taken advantage of by a lawyer. Aunt Sharon, my father's sister, a woman I'd driven to 2 colonoscopies, sent me a single line. Hope you're proud of yourself. Sunday came, and for the first time in my adult life, Sunday dinner in Beaver Creek happened without me. I know because Madison, out of habit or guilt, posted a photo of Tyler holding a biscuit, and behind him you could see the table, fully set, with one chair pulled out and empty like a tooth. I did not respond to any of it. No corrections in the group chat. No counterstory, no screenshots of the deed fired back like artillery. The truth was already traveling by certified mail. It didn't need my help. Then Tuesday, my father called. Not to apologize, to summon. He used his careful voice, the one for ice storms and power lines. Saturday, at the house. Your mother wants to settle this, all of us, around the table like adults. Bring your grandmother. In the background, I could hear my mother not whispering instructions, and I understood the shape of it immediately. This would be an ambush catered as a peace summit. A united front, the letter on the table, Tyler deployed somewhere visible, and me, managed back into my chair by sheer familial gravity. I said we'd come. I heard my mother exhale in the background, satisfied, and I let her be satisfied, because it was the last thing I'd ever hand her for free. Then I spent the week getting ready in my own way. I worked my shifts. I slept badly and charted anyway. I had one long phone call with Vance and one short one with my grandmother, who listened to what I was planning to say and was quiet for a moment, and then said, "Walt would have liked you in a fight." I put her card in the inside pocket of my good coat, where I could feel the corner of it against my ribs. Saturday morning, I stood in front of my mirror the way I stand outside a room before a code. Breathe in, count the equipment, know your job. I walked into that house calm, counted, and already certain that somebody's version of this family was going to flatline at that table. It just wasn't going to be mine. They'd set the dining room like a holiday, the department store Irish linen, the good dishes, coffee cake nobody would touch. Same table as the anniversary. My chair was in its usual spot, and I want you to notice, as I did, that everyone expected me to sit in the same place I'd sat my whole life. Tyler was installed in the den with cartoons turned up loud. My grandmother took the seat beside me, cane hooked on the table edge, and folded her hands. My mother waited until the coffee was poured, hostess to the last, and then presented the family solution with the bright, efficient warmth of a woman explaining a new carpool schedule. Point 1. Madison and Tyler stay in the house because a 5-year-old needs stability, and surely nobody at this table wants to punish a child. Point 2. Mom and Dad would make it right with Grandma. $300 a month, every month faithfully, until the amount was repaid. Point 3. I sign the letter. Grandma calls off the lawyer and tears up that awful demand, and this family puts a hard season behind it. She smiled around the table. Family carries family, she said. That's what we do. I sat there and did the arithmetic the way I do drip rates, automatically, without deciding to. $185,000 at $300 a month is over 600 payments, 51 years, and change. My mother would be 114 years old when the last check cleared. My grandmother would have been dead for decades. It wasn't a repayment plan. It was a funeral schedule for the debt, and everyone at that table knew it except possibly my father, who was looking at the window as if weather might still save him. My mother slid the letter across the linen and set her own pen on top of it and looked at me with total confidence. Fourth time, fourth pen. I didn't touch the pen. I put my hands flat on the linen, and I heard my own voice come out the way it does over a bed when the numbers are crashing. Low, even, unhurried, because panic is a luxury that costs other people. I signed something on Monday, I said. A sworn affidavit, with Grandma's attorney. It says I was never told about the gift, never received it, never consented. It's attached to the demand letter you got Thursday. The truth is already on record, Mom. It doesn't need my permission anymore, and neither do you. The room did that anniversary dinner thing again, that total silence, except this time nobody was confused about where to look. My mother's face went through 3 seasons in 5 seconds. You'd already... She started and stopped, and I watched her understand that the summit had been lost before the coffee was poured, that I had walked in with the ending in my pocket. And then she went off like a kettle left too long. The volume I'd been braced for my whole life, hands flat on the table, china jumping. Ungrateful. Cold. After everything. Tearing this family apart over a house. A house. When your sister had nothing and you were fine, you were always fine. And then it came. The sentence underneath every other sentence, the one she'd said on the phone like a label and screamed now like a creed. You didn't need it. I let it land. I let it sit on the linen between us with the untouched cake and the pen, and I said quietly, "You're right. I never needed a house. I needed a mother who asked me before she decided what I needed." She opened her mouth and I finished it, because 30 years were done waiting their turn. I've carried this family since I was 11, Mom. Dad's paperwork. Madison's rent, twice. Your mother's tact, apparently. Even my thank you notes. Family carries family. You're right about that too. You're just the only people I've ever met who won't carry back. My father stood up. And for a second, nobody, including him, knew which way he was going to face. He faced the window. Of course he did. He stood there gripping the chair back, looking at the yard, present and absent at the same time, and that was somehow the most honest thing any of them had done all month. It was my mother who cracked. And I need to tell this part carefully, because for about 30 seconds, I saw the 16-year-old under the 63-year-old, and I'm not going to pretend I didn't. Her voice dropped out of its scream into something scraped and young. Nobody ever bought me a house, she said. I was 16 when Daddy's tractor rolled. I raised 2 boys on a stove I could barely reach while she... A hand toward my grandmother, not quite pointing. Worked nights at the cannery. I gave up my spot at nursing school. Did you know that? I was going to be the nurse. A laugh with no floor under it. I asked for help once in my whole life, and this family told me I was the strong one and handed me the next thing to carry. So no, Grace, you don't get to be the first woman in this family who puts herself first. That is not how this works. The room held still. It was the truest thing my mother had ever said to me, and it explained everything, and it excused nothing, and those 2 facts just had to sit in the same chair. Then my grandmother spoke, for the first time since we'd sat down, very quietly, to her daughter. She's not the first, Carol. She's the first one I got to stand behind. I couldn't afford to stand behind you. It's the worst debt I ever carried, and I am paying it now to her, because you won't let me pay it to you." My mother looked at her mother for a long, terrible beat. Then she froze over, the cracked ceiling shut in front of us, and turned to me with a face like a locked door and said, "If that affidavit reaches a courtroom, you are no daughter of mine." The price, spoken out loud at last. "Then I'll miss you," I said. "I've had practice. I've been missing you from across this table my whole life." Madison made a small sound, and I turned to her, because the next part was hers, and mine, and I'd been carrying it all week like the card in my coat. "Here's what I came to say," I told the table. "One condition, and it's not negotiable, and it's not what any of you think. The money gets repaid to Grandma. By the people who took it. Not by Tyler's roof. The debt belongs to this table, not to a 5-year-old's bedroom." My mother blinked. Madison stopped breathing. "Madison, you get 6 months. Walk into a bank and put a mortgage on that house in your own name, and every dollar of it goes back to Grandma. Mrs. Vance will paper it. You'll be the first person in this family to actually pay for the thing you live in, and honestly, it might suit you." I looked around at all of them. "And I don't want the house. I want that herd. I know what it feels like to find out the ground under you was never yours. I'm not handing that feeling to a little boy who draws me holding a balloon. That's the whole difference between me and this family, and it's the only inheritance I actually need." My grandmother reached over and put her hand on mine, that thin wedding band pressing warm against my knuckles, and said to the room, in her seed invoice voice, "That was always the point of the gift, so she never has to ask." Then Madison cracked. Really cracked. Not the family half apology, but the whole thing. Ugly and wet. "I should have asked where it came from," she said, to Grandma first, then to me. "A free house doesn't happen to people like me. I knew that. I didn't want to know it, so I just didn't ask. I'm sorry, Grace. I've been sorry since the anniversary and too much of a coward to spend it." First honest sentence anyone in that family had spent on me in years. My mother said nothing at all. And her silence was new. Not the punishing kind she aimed, but the kind that happens when the script runs out and there are no more pages. I left before dessert. There was a symmetry to it I didn't plan and don't regret. A month earlier, I'd sat at that table while a lie collapsed over the cake, and now I stood up while the truth settled over it, and both times, nobody quite knew the etiquette. I kissed my grandmother's cheek. I stuck my head into the den, where Tyler was upside down on the couch, and told him I owed him a pizza, which is the only debt in this story that got settled that same week. My father followed me out onto the porch, the way he does, hands in pockets, scanning a clear sky for something to talk about instead. "She'll come around, Gracie," he said. "She just needs time. You know your mother." I did know my mother. That was the whole problem. I'd known her my entire life, and had only just now met her. "I'm not waiting anymore, Dad," I said, and it came out gentler than I expected, which is how I knew it was true. Waiting was the only thing I ever did for free. He didn't have a weather report for that. I got in my car, and my grandmother's card sat on the passenger seat where a person would sit, and I backed out of that driveway past the basketball hoop my father put up for Madison and never took down. In the rearview mirror, the porch light of the house I grew up in got smaller and smaller, and I kept waiting for that to hurt more than it did. 5 months. That's what it took for every piece of paper to find its right name, which is faster than Vance predicted and slower than my mother wanted. There was no courtroom. Certified Truth has a way of negotiating for you. Faced with a conversion suit they could not win and a paper trail with their own signatures on it, my parents refinanced the Beaver Creek house they'd owned, free and clear since I was in high school. It covered most of it. Madison covered the rest the way I asked. She walked into a credit union scared to death, with 2 years of dental office pay stubs and a folder I helped her organize, because apparently I can be angry at my sister and still alphabetize her tax returns. And she signed the first mortgage of her life, on the house she lives in in her own name. 214 Meadowlark Lane finally started getting paid for by the woman who lives in it. The wire back to my grandmother cleared on a Tuesday in October, $185,000, and Vance closed the file with no referral because the point had never been handcuffs. The point was the ledger, and the ledger was finally true. My mother has spoken to me once since that Saturday. A Christmas card, the kind with a cardinal on it, signed Mom. No note. I sent one back. Signed Grace. 2 women. One stubborn alphabet between them. Maybe that changes someday. The force that made her is still in her. I've stopped pretending I can nurse it out. My father calls on Sundays and talks about the Bengals and never, ever, about the weather in that dining room. Madison and I get coffee once a month. No scripts, both of us learning this strange new dialect of sisters who tell each other the truth. Tyler still has his rocket ship driveway. He'll never know what it almost cost. And that, right there, is the whole victory. And my grandmother gave the gift again. Properly this time, a transfer with my name on it, gift letter drafted by Vance, witnessed. Taxed at exactly nothing, exactly as the law always allowed. I'll tell you the embarrassing part, because this story doesn't work without it. My first instinct was to refuse. I actually said, "Grandma, I can't take this." Out loud, like a reflex, like a knee under a little hammer. 34 years of training announcing itself. My grandmother looked at me for a long moment and said, "Try again." So I tried again. I said thank you. It took everything I had. In December, I closed on a house. 9 showings, my own inspector, my own signature on every line. A little brick place 10 minutes from the hospital with a kitchen window that gets the morning sun. Herb the pothos lives on that windowsill now, thriving, smug. And taped inside the cabinet door where I keep my coffee mugs, where I see it every single morning before a shift, is an ivory card, soft at the corners, 2 years late, and right on time. For Grace. So you never have to ask anyone for a roof again. Love, Grandma. I never framed it. Frames are for things that are finished, and I read it like instructions. If your family only loves you for what you can carry, put it down, because the people who truly love you will pick up the other end, and the ones who just stand there watching were never lifting anything at all. That's my story. A question over an anniversary cake, a sealed card in a china cabinet, and one signature my family never saw coming. If you've ever been the strong one, the one whose share got quietly rerouted because you'd manage, I'd truly love to hear your story in the comments. And if you want more stories about quiet women who stop paying for everyone else's peace, subscribe and turn on notifications. Thanks for listening.